Hi, my name is Dale Maley. I'm a woodworker. I've made probably over 75 different wood models. I often take them out in public for displays. And one of the most common questions I always get is, how in the world did you get your ideas to make over 75 different wood models? So, this video explains my background and where I got most of my ideas. Now, a little personal background on myself. I was raised on a farm in Fairbury, Illinois. I graduated from Fairbury-Cropsey High School, then went to the University of Illinois, where I got a Bachelor of Science in Agricultural Engineering, specializing in power machinery. Later, I got an MBA from Illinois State University. After college, I worked 2 years for Ford Tractor Company in Detroit, and they had an excellent engineer training program. Then I came back home to Caterpillar, and I ended up working 37 years at Caterpillar. My last few years I was involved with developing sophisticated testing machines, usually costing over $1 million a piece. Along the way, I picked up 16 U.S. patents, all related to diesel fuel injection. When I was a kid growing up on the farm in 1960s, there was no internet. But my dad got the family a 1968 World Book Encyclopedia, and in it had some detailed instructions for building models or science projects. And I actually built many of those, including an electric motor model. I guess that's the first start of my model building career. In my early 20s, I took an interest in woodworking, and I learned a lot from Lloyd Wells, who was my father-in-law. I ended up building all different types of projects, furniture, you name it. And then later in life, I started building hand-cranked mechanical models. And the thing I like about those is there's no batteries ever required. Kids and adults both enjoy them. It's a relatively inexpensive hobby once you have the woodworking machines, and they're very fun to design and build. One of the first books I used to make wood models is this one, Making Mechanical Marvels in Wood, and it has about 15 different hand-cranked models. The guy that wrote the book was actually a teacher, and he built them to use in his classroom to teach basic mechanical concepts. I ended up building most of the models in that book. Another book I got some ideas from is this one here called Action Whirligigs by Anders Lunde. And there's some pretty neat projects in there. The only problem is I had to beef up a lot of the designs because the wind really blows hard here in central Illinois, and it'll tear up a lot of the models the way the guy had them designed. One of the most popular models I ever built is this one here, where the title of it is Woman is the Boss. So as I mentioned, it's too windy here in central Illinois for these. So I got the idea, why not convert them over from wind-powered over to hand-crank models? So here's the hand-crank version of that same model, where woman is the boss. I take this out many times a year because it's so popular with everyone that uses it. So about the time I ran out of ideas for making more hand-crank models, I stumbled across this book published way back in 1868, and it's titled 507 Mechanical Movements, Mechanisms, and Devices by Henry T. Brown. And I got the idea, why not modify some of these 1868 ideas and make them into hand-cranked models? Here's a typical mechanism from that old 1868 book. You typically get a concept drawing shown on the left here. Then there's a little text paragraph which gives a very basic explanation of how it's supposed to work. So the question I asked myself many years ago, how do you convert that 1868 concept into a hand crank model? Now I use SketchUp, a free drafting program, so here's my version of that old 1868 concept shown in SketchUp. Now here's the actual wood model that I ended up making. And boy, the kids really love this one because there's lots of motion and it makes lots of noise. It's very popular. Next, I got the idea to make a wooden hand-cranked Ferris wheel. And the first Ferris wheel really made its appearance at the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. And they were trying to come up with something that would outdo the French because they held the previous World Fair in Paris, and they built the Eiffel Tower. So Chicago's answer to the French was to have this massive Ferris wheel. It was 264 feet high, and as a result, every fair today still has a Ferris wheel. I saved this little doodling sketch that I made, and my idea was have the Ferris wheel go around and then have a series of gears in the back to slow the speed down as you hand cranked it from the back. I did some Google searches back then, and I found this metal old Ferris wheel, hand cranked, but it had wooden carriers. So I kind of stole the idea of the wooden carriers and incorporated that into my design. And my design shown on the right with a little boy and a little girl smiling. My design is in SketchUp is shown on the left hand side, and then the actual model that I built, mostly out of red oak, is shown on the right. And I always try to put a coffee mug in for scale so you can get an idea how big the Ferris wheel is. As soon as I got the model built, I let the grandkids play with it. And of course, the first thing kids do is crank it as fast as they can go. And what happened here, the little people flew out of their carriers. And gee, I forgot to design in any seat belts. But no damage is done. All you have to do is pick up the little wooden people off the floor and put them back in their baskets. Then I went through a phase where I made a lot of different kinds of wooden locks. And I started out using this book by Tim Detweiler, Working Wooden Locks. He was a locksmith, I believe, in Ohio. And hey, you're turning a key. It's kind of like a hand crank model. But the most ingenious thing I thought he did was all locks I were familiar with always had metal springs in them. So how did he make a completely wooden model without using any steel springs? So Mr. Detweiler came up with the ingenious idea, instead of a steel spring, why not make a wooden spring and use ash? And ash actually makes a pretty good spring. I made one of these locks, and I had a request from the boy's mother. Could I put plastic on the front so he could see what he was doing? Usually it had wood on the front. So I did that, and her son was autistic. So I made the lock with the plastic so he could see it with a key. I shipped it off, and a week or two later, she contacted me back, and she says her son absolutely loves it, and he loved it so much he wore out the key. And could I please make another key? So I made 2 more keys and shipped them to him, and I never heard any more, so I'm assuming he enjoyed the lock with the keys. Here's another really neat old book. Dates back to 1922, Advanced Toy Making. What's amazing about this to me is this isn't high school shop class, this is grade school shop class. This old 1922 book has a really neat pattern in there for making a really cool looking old wood car, as shown here. I had a suspicion that car in the 1922 book was patterned off an actual car, so I did a little Google searching, and by golly, I think I found it. I think it was based on a 1904 Thomas Flyer actual car. Made a lot of these cars for the grandkids, as shown here, and you might be asking, why is there a pink one? Well, that's because at the time I had 1 granddaughter and 3 grandsons. I think I saw this very neat and very big marble machine, maybe on YouTube first, and it's a 26 marble machine. It was designed by a retired engineer for his granddaughter. He's now deceased. He actually made 2 of them, and what he did, he gave photos and drawings to a woodworking magazine, and then the woodworking magazine sold the 32-page plan booklet for a whopping $10. Well, I bought the plan, and I would say the 32 pages of plans were almost worthless. Why was that? Well, that guy was designed as an old school engineer with only 2D drafting. So there was no 3D views at all of the insides of this, which are actually very complicated. And a few 3D illustrations would have been priceless trying to figure out how to build it. One bad thing about this model is the guy came up with some really neat mechanical contraptions, but they're all hidden inside the main box of the machine. So I actually designed and built a separate Illustrator version of this, which is shown here, and it demonstrates to kids and adults how all the key mechanisms actually work inside of the machine. So here's a photo of the big marble machine that I built, and right beside it is the small Illustrator version. And it has, the big one has 2 tracks, which I decided to color differently, green and yellow. You push the start button in front and it runs automatically for about 16 minutes to discharge the 26 marbles one at a time. Very neat machine. I actually got the idea for this next project from YouTube, and a guy had this model on YouTube. It was made out of steel and it was run by a 5 RPM motor. I thought, hey, can I convert that over to a wood model and then make it a hand crank model? So I thought, how do I convert it to a hand crank model? Because kids can hand crank up to over 100 RPM, and I only need 5 RPM, which means the gear down ratio has to be 20:1. Well, in the mechanical gear world, spur gears won't do that. About the only kind of gear I know that would do that is a wood gear, and I had to figure out how to make a wooden worm gear. So here's the SketchUp drawing of my model, which is wood and uses a wooden worm gear, and it's a hand crank model. Here's the first model I built. I actually used brass here, and then later I made a second one where I eliminated the brass and used all wood. And people are just fascinated or mesmerized by the lifting mechanism. There's 2 arms that transport the marbles up to the top. And I don't know what it is about it, but it's just mesmerizing to watch the thing in motion. All these projects of mine that you've seen in this video, I likely made a separate YouTube video for each one of them. And right now I have over 1,700 subscribers to my YouTube channel, and I have 263 videos on my YouTube channel. Some of them are extremely popular, like how to make wood worm gears, or make worm gears out of wood, or secrets of how to steam bend wood. So you can take a look. I have a lot of videos and cover a lot of different projects. I also post most of my projects on a website called lumberjocks.com, and many of the members there think that my brass worm gear marble lifter is one of my best hand crank models on there. But you can check it out. Most of my projects are also on Lumberjocks. Extremely good website. So some closing thoughts on this video. I think that designing and building wood models is a very fun hobby. Once you have the woodworking equipment, it's a relatively inexpensive hobby. Most of the materials for each project are relatively inexpensive. So I hope I've answered that question, how do I get all my ideas for my models? And I've shown you here that I've included books that I've used to get ideas. You can also look at my YouTube videos of various projects. You can look at other people's YouTube videos to get ideas, lumberjocks.com, and all my models are also uploaded to the SketchUp Warehouse as well. So in summary, this video explains how I got the ideas to make over 75 different types of wood models. Hopefully this video helps you on your projects and gives you some ideas. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe. Thank you.